Okay, so I assume that I am unmuted and that you could see me and hear me. Is that true? Yes? Okay, good. So Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av by its nature is a celebration of failure. What I want to talk about now are three different things. One is what it is that we're mourning, what the whole presence of the Beis Hamikdash would do for our lives, what its message is. If it's a day of failure to restore the Beis Hamikdash, as Chazal say, what is it that we're failing to restore, and why is it important? Another question I would like to address would be this, that so many calamities happened on Tisha B'Av, there must be meaning that's intrinsic to the day. And the final thing would be, and what should our position be in trying to change things if we don't like them as they are now without a Beis Hamikdash? Okay, so let's go right into it. So the first thing is, what significance does the Beis Hamikdash has? Why don't we feel a loss of it if it was so meaningful? So I want to give you a well-known parable. Imagine yourself during the time of the Inquisition. The Inquisition had two stages. In the first stage, anybody could have converted to Catholicism and lived as a normal Spaniard, or left with their possessions without any consequences. Okay, other than, of course, selling their things would be difficult. Then a significant proportion of the Jews left, but others stayed thinking this is going to blow over. It's going to be okay. This is temporary. So once they were there and nominally became Christians, but were really practicing Judaism, the Inquisition began to operate, trying to find out who is really still practicing Judaism, although they claim to be Christian. So as you know. So envision a family that tried to escape from Spain at that point. They can't take anything. They have to do everything very secretly. Somehow they managed to put passage on a ship that's going to North Africa. Okay, in those days, they still had pirates. It was real. Okay, imagine that their boat is attacked by pirates. What's the worst thing that could happen to the 17-year-old daughter? What do you think is the worst thing that could happen? Melissa, what do you think? Unmute yourself. You don't know? Okay. Any volunteers?
She could be evicted.
Okay. I want to tell you a different idea of mine. I think the worst thing that could happen to her is that she won't be killed. Because living under those circumstances would mean her being sold in the slave market in Marrakesh. Okay. Let's say that happened to her and she's purchased. And her new master is everything in her worst nightmares she could have predicted. Okay, she's totally dehumanized. At that point, she sees her life as a nightmare. She has a child through him. The child grows. Does the child see her own life as a nightmare? Only to the degree to which the mother could influence her to see it in this way. Otherwise, she thinks she's just like all of the other children who live in the harem, and her expectations are very limited. Let's say at the age of 14, the child is sold out of the harem. So to the mother, this is even worse than her own emotional death, seeing that her child will have the same life that she had. The child doesn't see it that way, but certainly the grandchild won't see it that way. So we've been many, many generations without the Beis Hamikdash. If we think of a generation as 20 years, we're talking about hundreds of generations. Okay, so that being the case, okay, how could we possibly mourn it? So in order to mourn it, we have to have some idea of what it was. So I'm going to talk now about what the Beis Hamikdash was. So in order to understand what it was, we have to realize that it came into being through several stages. The first stage was Yaakov seeing it. he was able when he escaped his home and was running to Lavan, he saw the famous ladder dream, angels rising and falling. And his response to seeing this dream, was to say that he sees now that where he is Bet Elokim. It's the house of Hashem. So what that, my thing just went off. I don't know if this is true for you as well. Let me just see what's happening here. I'm back.
We can still see it. We can still see it.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Okay, so he says this is Bet Elokim, this is Shar Shamayim. So we have a definition of there being a promise of a place that is the gate to heaven, that is a house of Hashem. Okay, but it remained a promise. Okay, the next appearance we have of it is when the Jews had formed a nation. So Yaakov became the father of a nation, not just a family. His 12 sons all remained within the fold, unlike Avram, who had Yishmael, unlike Yitzchak, who had Esav. There were 12 of them. Each one is unique, born under a different mazal, but they're all together. They still are a nation. What draws them together is their desire to know Hashem on Hashem's terms. Thus, the 12 tribes, all born under another astral sign, it parallels the 12 ways through which you could rearrange the letters of Hashem's name. They each experienced Hashem in their own way, but they were part of a whole. So in order for them to become a real whole, they had to go through what we went through in Mitzrayim. And they had to see the liberation. And they had to receive the Torah. And if this was a movie, the curtains would come down. But no. Finally, they had to make the Mishkan. The Mishkan is Hashem's telling them, I will dwell with you. Not only you will seek me, I will dwell with you. So the Mishkan was a place of meeting between them and Hashem. So the pattern of the Mishkan followed the pattern that they used in their own encampment as they wandered. How did they encamp? So as we know, they broke camp 42 different times during their stay in the desert, but it was always the same pattern. There was an outer encampment, that's called Machane Yisrael, then an inner one called Machane Levia, and an inner one called Machane Shechina. The Jews as a whole, all 12 tribes other than Levi, were in Machane Yisrael, and they were arranged 3 on each side, each one given their own individual role, okay? But they're a whole. But they surround Machane Levia, the Machane of the Kohanim, the Machane of the Leviim, where they dedicate themselves to service of Hashem. And finally, they get everything that they have, everything that they could give to the people through the Machane Shechina, which was the Mishkan and Moshe. So you have three different pieces of the pattern that was echoed by the Mishkan itself. What did the Mishkan look like? So outside, there's an Azara. What happened in the Azara? The Azara is the statement of all Klal Yisrael saying, this is who we are. What happened in the Azara? The Azara was the place where the animal offerings took place. So korbanos are something that most people really, really don't understand. There's a true story. A certain Rav was at the Kotel, and a non-Jewish fellow from Sweden says, is this really the remnants of the temple? And he said, yes. He said, are you people going to do sacrifices? So he said, well, not right now, maybe later today, but whatever, meaning Mashiach can come at any time. But what was this all for? Okay, so we have spiritual souls and animal souls. The spiritual soul is the soul that wants goodness, that wants kindness, that wants truth. Who's the animal soul? You've all been to bar mitzvahs, right? Okay, let's say they're serving buffet style, and there's Chinese food, and there's some really nice sliced meat, but as it goes down the table, it gets sort of weaker and weaker until the last part is potato salad. So those of us who are stronger, younger, more energetic, okay, will see that they get the good stuff, okay? So what am I saying? There's an animal self. We know this. We're a little aggressive. We're a little selfish. Okay. The animal self is not the Yetzer Hara. The animal self is meant to listen to the voice of the spiritual self and be used for the good. So I have to illustrate that to you so you will understand the korbanos that were done in the Azara. Okay, so every person is considered like a miniature world, a microcosm of the world. So at the Azara, Machane Levi and Machane Shchinas has a parallel in us. So if you like word games, word devices more correctly, think of the word melech, which means king in Hebrew. Moach means mind. One part of us is mem. Then there's lev, the heart, the emotions. And finally, there's kaved, the liver. The liver, what's that doing here? Okay. So who we are people who experience life with the mind taking in information through the senses. Okay. The mind interprets this information, and this is where free choice comes in. You can interpret things and let it move you towards the part of you that wants good or not. Okay, the mind's meant to be the navigator. The heart feels, and in the end, the heart is the captain. And then the body does. But the way the body does is epitomized by the liver. What does the liver do? It filters. Says this is good and this is bad. This will enter and this won't. Our deeds are continued filtering. This is what I'll do, and this is what I won't, and this is what I want, and this is what I don't. Okay, so we're moach, lev, kaved, mind, heart, body. Okay, so in the body part, which was the azara, the externalized part, we did animal sacrifices, symbolizing that we seek to use our choice capacity to determine who we are as we make choices involving the animal self. There were 6 different animals used in sacrifices. Okay, I'm just going to pick one. You could say thank you. Think about a bull, lots of aggressive energy. Could be very damaging. Aggressive energy could be very damaging. It could be the energy that's used towards forcing your way upon everyone else. It could be the energy that's used to destroy, or it could be the part of you that is willing to make everything happen if it needs to happen, do brave rescues if those rescues need to be made. Okay, so everything depends on how you use the energy. So in animal offerings, there was a commitment to identify with a specific animal of the 6 animals, to lean on it so you feel its life force. Then it's shechted the way an animal would be shechted if you were eating meat. And its blood, which is its life force, this is considered the most essential part of the sacrifice, would be placed on the altar and offered to Hashem. I'll use this energy for the good. Okay, so that commitment is what took place in the Azara. Every Jew has something in common. We all are here to elevate the world and ourselves. The main difference between Judaism and other religions, the Gemara says, is that we could elevate physicality. The other religions are transcendental. They try to escape physicality. So think about Judaism. Kashrus, Shabbos, Nida. They're all about dealing with the physical world. Okay, so we have the Azara. The Azara is the Kaved. Then you move in and you have in the Mishkan what's called the Heichal. So what was the Machane Leviah in the Mishkan is called the Heichal, which means the sanctuary. What was in the sanctuary? You walk in, you have the incense altar, which is both in a different place and does something different than the animal sacrifices. To your right, you have the menorah, and to your left, you have the sacred table with the 12 breads, the 12 loaves, then a curtain, and behind the curtain, you have what was equivalent to Machane Shechina, which was that the Aron was, the sacred ark with the Torah in it. So what are you seeing now when you look at the Mishkan? You're seeing how the part of you that's passionate and physical could be uplifted, not just the animalistic part, but the spiritual self. So let's look at the table. So on the table, there are 12 loaves, and they would be put on every Friday. And when the old ones were replaced, they were just as warm and fresh as they were at the beginning. What this is to suggest is that when used for spiritual purpose, material things don't die. They leave an impression. You invite someone for a meal. The food's gone, but the meal, the hospitality and the warmth stays with the person. You yourself eat a meal, and you say a blessing before you eat the food, and you say Birkat HaMazon afterwards. The food's gone, but you're changed. So the sacred table is meant to reflect spiritual change that takes place when you interact and give your spiritual voice an opportunity to speak. Now, we all have emotional relationships to food. Is that true? Yes, no? If you don't, I hate you. So,
Definitely, definitely.
yes. Okay, so you could use your emotions to make a bond with you and Hashem. Right across from the table was the menorah. The menorah was made of solid gold. It was made of one piece. It couldn't be each piece made separately and then banged together. It was huge. It was 32 tefachim. This is a tefach, so it was taller than a person. Okay, so what's the menorah? The menorah is to tell you that there's a part of us that's pure gold, which is the spiritual soul. But the spiritual soul could either be ignited or not. So there are different traits that we have. They're there in everyone's heart. Let's say the desire to exercise loving kindness. Everyone wants to love. But there are people who associate love with vulnerability. There are people who associate love with losing, so they won't love. There's a part of every person that wants to fight the good fight, to do the right thing and to achieve things that are noble. But that part of oneself could be also silenced and misdirected. Instead of doing something like being the one who runs in the building to save the baby, you could be the one who grows your nail long enough to get into Guinness Book of Records. Did you ever see that picture? Okay, both feel like achievements. Okay, so there are 7 different ways in which we have the potential to express our spiritual selves honestly, through loving kindness, through meeting real goals with real effort and being strong, through harmony and truth, through maintaining a sense of this, that we're all eternal. Okay, nobody would ever fight for a cause if they didn't believe that there's something more than today. A sense of gratitude is part of our spiritual self. A sense of loyalty to the person who you care about or the people who you care about. The desire to have Hashem rule. All of these are part of your spiritual self, but you have to ignite them. And you have to use pure oil. And you have to stand there. The Kohen had to stand there, igniting it until it stayed lit. So now we have the table, which has to do with your relationship to food emotionally, to the menorah, which has to do with your relationship to your soul emotionally. Keep it alive, keep it lit. There was also the incense altar. What did that do? So the incense altar used fragrances, 11 of them. 10 of them were beautiful, and 1 of them was awful. So what do they symbolize? We all have many aspects of beauty. We have the 7 traits we spoke about with the menorah, plus 3 additional ones. We have the intellectual self, the self that wants to understand and to know Hashem and to know people and to make choices. So there are 10 in all. 10 beautiful ones and 1 that was pungent and awful. So this is to tell you that spiritual ascent needs evil. Let me explain to you what I mean. Would you all consider Esther to be heroic? Esther, Queen Esther from the Megillah? Would you consider her to be heroic? Yes, no,
Yes.
yes. If there was no Achashverosh, would she still be a hero if she was just living her life quietly with Mordechai until she died? No. To be Esther, she needed Achashverosh. Avraham needed Terach and Nimrod. Moshe needed Paro. You need whatever you struggle with. Does this make sense to you?
Yeah.
Your good attributes only find their voice as they interact with the other parts of you. And because of this, the incense had to have 10 holy, beautiful possibilities of response, and the one thing that's going to spark it. Okay, so those are the vessels. And then on the inside, you have the Torah. What's that about? That's about the neshama. Without knowing Torah, you could have the best intentions in the world and do terrible things. I want to share something with you. I keep on repeating this because it's so awful, which is I have to get out of this habit of repeating terrible things. I received a clip about what actually happens to kids who do sex change surgeries. There's controversy now in America about at what age children should legally be allowed to go to a physician and ask to have their sex changed. And the controversy has reached a point that they're considering allowing children as young as 16 to do this without parental consent. So what's involved? There were two parts of the clip. The first one involved a girl of 16 who wants to be a boy. Okay, so what does that entail? A year and a half of hormone treatment should be done first, but they sometimes skip it. Then a double mastectomy. Then a surgery in which all of the feminine parts of her inner body, her womb, her ovaries, her tubes, everything is removed. Then her urethra is displaced from its normal place and inserted in what will be the artificial penis. The artificial penis is just that. It's like a piece of rubber. So she will be able to urinate standing up, but she won't have sensation of other parts of that area of her body. She will never, the clitoris can't be involved. So she will never have an orgasm. Okay, and then after all of this is done, she still has facial surgery to do and a continuum of testosterone. So you could think, is this all done in one surgery? No, this is done in 4 surgeries. They're all major. They all require general anesthesia. The more major one requires a 2.5-week hospital stay. Could a 16-year-old possibly know what she's doing when she wants this? There's no way a 16-year-old could know this. And the same thing is for a boy who, quote, wants to be a girl. Again, hormonal stuff, and then artificial breasts, and then, okay, he loses his manhood. He's given some sort of an artificial, but with no sense, vaginal passage. And again, his urethra also has to be displaced so he could urinate sitting down. Neither the girl or the boy will ever have children, ever. There's no way to reverse this surgery. 16-year-olds are asked to sign. Okay, now, with this in mind, this horror, I want to ask one question. Is it conceivable to you, if you didn't hear it presented the way I presented it, but we presented a different way? She always wanted to be a boy. She feels like she's locked in the wrong body. Could you see where somebody intending good could be active in promoting this? A good person, because what? If you don't have Torah, your emotions don't know where to go. They don't know where to go. In England, I've heard, where education is, how shall I phrase it, more under the governmental thumb than in the United States, the teachers are required to present all sorts of options as being equally valid. I don't know if this is true or not. I assume that it's true. In the United States, where it's not required by the government, in the preppier schools, Okay, there's a woman who is not religious. I don't even know if she's Jewish, but she took her child out of one of the more exclusive schools in Manhattan because the teacher would begin the day in kindergarten by asking them, who wants to be a boy? Who wants to be a girl today? You can be whatever you want. And these people mean well. Okay, so you can't know what's true unless you know Torah. So that's why we have the outer courtyard, and then we have the Heichal, which is divided in two. This was all in the Mishkan. The Mishkan is not yet the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash is even more than that. The difference between the Beis HaMikdash and the Mishkan is that the place upon which the Mishkan was built has no particular sanctity. It was built over 42 different places in the desert as they traveled. When they entered Israel, it was in Nov, and then in Givon, and finally in Shiloh. But the places have no particular meaning. Yerushalayim has meaning. The place itself has Kedusha. Even before there was a Beis HaMikdash, it had Kedusha. How so? When Hashem told Avraham, leave everything behind you, your birthplace, your father's house, everything, and go to the land where I'll show you you. It doesn't say where I'll show you it. It says Areka, which means I'll show you you. He knew where to go. He headed towards Yerushalayim. It drew him like a magnet drew him because there is inherent Kedusha. Later in his life, when he already had emerged from the person he was as a youth, he had trials and miracles, and he has Yitzchak. And Yitzchak is 37 years old. And Hashem tells him to bring Yitzchak as an offering. Where does he go? He was living in Hebron. He didn't know where to go because Hashem didn't tell him. He said, go to Eretz HaMoriah. There was no place that on the map that you could put in the GPS. You put in Moriah, you don't get anything. But they headed towards what actually became Yerushalayim. Last night, I took my seminary girls on a bus trip. So I'm sure you've all been in Israel. Next time you go to Israel, you may consider going to the Tayelet, which means the promenade, in a neighborhood called Armon HaNetziv, which is right off Talpiot. These names mean nothing to you. It's one of the southernmost neighborhoods of Yerushalayim. Why am I telling you to go there besides its extraordinary beauty? Because Avram for sure had to stand on what today is the far end of the Tayelet when he saw Har HaBayit surrounded by clouds. Why am I telling you that? Because that's the first place you could see Har HaBayit when you're coming from Hebron. So you can go next time you're in Israel, you could literally stand where Avram stood, give or take a couple of feet, okay? So you look down there, you see Har HaBayit. If you go at night, you see lights in a row, and behind the light to the left, you could see the dome. What did Avram see? He didn't see a dome. He didn't see electrical lights. He was there in the day. It says in the text, he got up early in the morning. He saw a mountain with a cloud surrounding it. The cloud was a symbol of the presence of the Shekhinah. Yishmael didn't see it, Eliezer didn't see it. Where's the first place we have a cloud? Way back in Maseh Bereshit, when Hashem made the world, it was all ready to go, but nothing began to grow until Adam began to pray. So what Hashem was, the message there is there has to be an awakening from below. You have to be willing to live in the world. The world was created for humans. You have to be able to respond. He prayed, and vapor rose from the earth, which turned into cloud. And from that point on, the cloud is a symbol of Hashem's presence. Okay, so Avram saw it. Why? Because the place is unique. The first place we have any mention of this as a place, not as human response to the place or to the world, the place itself. And the Torah says that Hashem made Adam from the earth. He gathered the earth to make Adam. From where? Rashi gives us two possibilities. One is from all over the earth. Particular earth from that which is earth. the whole system. The other is from the place that later would be the place of the altar. Maharal says this is not two different opinions, but one opinion. The place of the altar is the place of universality. That's why it has all of the Kedusha that can be drawn into the world. And that's what that universal statement of, yes, you could reach me and I will respond to you, which is the Mizbeach, was there in the place that later was the place of the Mizbeach to begin with. And Avram later identified it when he got to the place of the cloud and attempted to offer Yitzchak, but was stopped by Hashem. He gave it a name, Har Hashem Yored, the place where Hashem could be seen and feared. Yitzchak called it the field, meaning you have to work there to do it. But by the time the Beis Hamikdash was erected, their merit, and it says in the Torah directly it was their merit made it possible. The imprint they left made it possible for the Jews to have this holy place with this building, with the Azara, with the Heichal, etc. What was it like to be there? So one of the names of Yerushalayim, there are 10 names. Okay, you're familiar with some of them. You know Yerushalayim, you know Tzion, which means the place that's excellent, that's marked off. But one of them that you may not know is Lebanon. Not the country that's next to Syria, but that which makes white. Lavan is white. You could enter the Beis Hamikdash, and that holy place, in this holy building. And when you enter, just like when you go anywhere today, you come in with all your baggage. You all have baggage? You know what they say, when Mashiach comes and El Al starts running flights, they'll have to run quadruple flights because everyone's taking all their baggage. You take your baggage wherever you go. The baggage from your youth, the baggage from your interactions with your family, with your husband, with your children, with the world, with your employer, with your mother-in-law, okay, whatever. We have an enormous amount of baggage. And a lot of our baggage has to do with Hashem giving us, through his providence, many different possibilities of response. Remember when he said Esther wouldn't be Esther without Achashverosh. We have difficulties and we could choose how to respond and we don't always do it right. We come with the baggage, which is all of the sins and the barriers and the stuff that we create, and we take it wherever we go. We take ourselves wherever we go. You go to the Beis Hamikdash and you go out clean. The animal offerings elevated your animal soul. You can complete kapara. The imprint is gone. The ketoret elevated your spiritual self. The big day kahuna, the garments that were worn by the Kohen. The Kohen Gadol was the essence of the Jewish people as Hashem chose him to represent. So his garments, the garments of the soul, are thought, speech, and action. Each one of his garments atoned for something. Okay, so even sins of speech, which seem so personal and so difficult to atone for, the coat he wore had both bells and pomegranates. The pomegranates weren't real pomegranates, they were woven out of wool. What's the voice of the bells? The voice of the bells is speak holy speech, positive, building, constructive, and it'll drown out your desire to speak scandal, evil, destruction. But there are also the silent pomegranates. As you know, a pomegranate contains many seeds, not 613. I tried, but the bigger ones have more, the smaller ones have less. But I did Google on the Pomegranates Association of Growers, and an average one really does have a little over 600 seeds. Okay, so we all have many potentials. Okay, but so when you want to say something negative or destructive about another Jew, recognize he has potentials and you be silent. The speech and the silence. So even something as personal and as self-descriptive as speech, we had atonement in the Beis Hamikdash. So if you're asking what we want to be able to let go of our baggage. Bayit Rishon was different than Bayit Sheni. In Bayit Rishon, there were many continual miracles. Okay, in Bayit Sheni, there wasn't. Why was Bayit Rishon destroyed and why was Bayit Sheni different? So we're told that the major sins that were observable in Bayit Rishon were sexual immorality, murder, and idol worship. That doesn't mean your average person got up in the morning, like put a few ashes near the Buddha, then went out and murdered somebody to console himself, had an affair. No. Okay, it means that this could happen in the society that was then alive. Now, remember we said that it was built in the merit of the patriarchs. The merit of the patriarchs is a very tricky thing to understand. In the Gemara, it says that when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and we're talking in that context about Bayit Rishon, Tamu zechut avot, we lost their merit. But every day, if you daven Shmona Esrei, you say Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. So what are we talking about? The potentials don't die, but we could choose to silence them. So Avram's main characteristic was what? You know this. What was Avram's main characteristic?
Chesed.
Chesed. Okay, chesed is loving kindness. You can't be a person who is sexually immoral if you're exercising loving kindness. Loving kindness means that you care about the other person as you care about yourself. Sexual immorality is exploitive. So when that could exist in the society, they lost the merit of Avram through choice. It could be regained. Okay, what was Yitzchak's main quality? Going once. What? I heard a response there. Gvura, being strong. Okay. Now, being strong in a spiritually developed way means being strong enough to defeat the real enemies of self and of one's relationship to Hashem. Who are the real enemies? So it says in the Gemara that there are two forms of Yetzer Hara, the kind that says be promiscuous and the kind that says worship idols. There's Gaiva and there's Taiva. Yitzchak was strong enough to say, I'll give my life to Hashem, and conquered himself. A person who has Yitzchak in him will not worship idols. Yitzchak wanted absolute commitment towards Hashem. When you worship idols, you want to distance from Hashem. You want to reach him through something else. Okay, Yaakov. It says about Yaakov in the Gemara that he didn't die. Now, if he didn't die, who's there in Marat HaMachpelah? An imposter? No. Okay. It means spiritually he's still there. Through his descendants, through Am Yisrael. If you're disassociated from Am Yisrael, the acid test is if you could commit a murder. That's the ultimate act of disassociation. So when those three sins had become possible in our society, it's a result of our having lost Zchut Avot, and we lost the Beis Hamikdash. Now, when you meet someone in the street and they introduce themselves, and you say, my name is Melissa Waldman. I'm only picking on you because I could see your name right in front of me. Okay. You don't say, and this is my brain, and here's my heart. Shall I open my, okay. Would you like to know my liver? No. You're Melissa Waldman. You're a person with an identity. Bayit Sheni was built because we still had identity. We didn't have the equivalent of the shulchan, the menorah, the mizbeach haktar. We didn't have the kalim, but we had the bayit. We had what Yaakov saw. We had the identity. Now, which was more precious to Hashem? His building it in the merit of the avos, or our longing to come together on the basis of our being Jews? The second one. It says in the Gemara that the second was greater. It says in the text, actually, is greater than the first. The simple reason is that it endured longer. But the deeper reason is that Hashem's values are a longing. So we have the Beis Hamikdash, which was all Hashem's chesed, and the Beis Hamikdash, which was all human gvura, seeking to seek him. And both of them acted as great atonements. The first one, we knew when the Golus would be over. We were told by the prophet 70 years. It's a lifespan. Start again, new people. Because their sins in the end were sins of specific aspects of self. But identity is the whole self. The end was not revealed. It's when we re-identify as a people who could reach out to Hashem using ourselves and using the world. Okay, we use the words tikkun atzmi and tikkun olam, and as you know, the Reform Jews have captured those words, but I saw them in the Gra way before Reform. This is where they bring Hashem into the world, fix it. Having an identity doesn't mean that you identify with the people who are your mirror image. It means that you identify with the Jewish people as a whole. And this is very difficult because we're very fragmented. And the fragmentations will only get worse until Mashiach comes. But we have to try to find what's real and what's enduring in every Jew we encounter. There are two questions one could learn to ask. What could I learn from you? And how could I help you? Those questions give us back Jewish identity. When we have that, Hashem will be ready to build the Bayit Shlishi, which will have the components of the first two. So what could you do today? Develop your identity within yourself and within other people. So that is it for now, and you have some time for questions.
Firstly, thank you, Rebbetzin Gottlieb. Always a pleasure. I saw a video clip of a fox on the outside of the old city.
Wow.
Are we ready? We pack our bags already? Or we should have
Yeah.
packed them a few weeks
Pack
ago?
our bags, and I want to tell you what it may mean. Rabbi Akiva saw a fox coming out of what was the Holy of Holies after the destruction, and he began to laugh. So his companion said, "What's so funny about this?" And he said, if the negative promises are fulfilled, the positive ones will be also. A fox is a symbol of a clever animal, okay? An exploitive animal, a hunting animal. And sometimes that part of us comes out even out of the Holy of Holies, but we'll overcome it. And that's what Rabbi Akiva saw. So this is a time where through our efforts of beseeching Hashem. And why am I saying beseeching Hashem? Because in Mitzrayim, which is the map of how the Geula will be, Hashem was ready to do what we didn't do on our own, what we failed in doing it on our own, as soon as we cried out to him. So we not only have to try to feel more unity with other people and greater identity, we have to cry out to Hashem to ask him to help.
And Rebbetzin Gottlieb, can you see the messages? Somebody just sent in a message, or would you like me to read it out to you?
Read it. I don't see it. I don't
Okay,
know
one
how to.
second.
Oh, wait, it's here.
It's a bit.
Isn't the word chesed used in Torah, I think in Vayikra, to describe somebody who's sexually, I assume, sexually immoral?
So there
Yes,
was a
it
first, there was another question. Is that part of the same question? Because why do we want to let go of our baggage if that is what creates greatness, like Esther and
Okay.
Achashverosh?
Good. So I'll answer one at a time. So the first one, misguided chesed, because chesed has to do with giving forth. It has to do with substituting the desire to love the other with love of self. Chesed who? I want to give, I want to bond, I want to whatever, but it's not on the terms of the Torah. And as we said, if you don't have the Torah, you could justify everything and believe in yourself and do it sincerely. So the reason why we want to let go of our baggage is because there's such a thing as point of choice. I want to illustrate what that is. There's some things nobody who's listening to this broadcast is going to do. Nobody here will rob a bank. You're far too cowardly. So it's not your conflict level. Okay. So that's not in your baggage. Lashon hara might be in your baggage. Okay. Ideally, what life is about is letting go of the things that are more capable of concealing goodness by choosing goodness and discarding badness, by discarding evil, as Esther did. She chose to save the Jewish people, even at the expense of self. So the goal of letting go of your baggage is not to never make choices, but to make choices that are not between things that are limiting, concealing, that should be below us, and rather to choose between levels of being that are progressively higher. And since Hashem is infinite, there's no end to that. So I don't recall the other two questions accurately. One was, where are the women allowed to go into the Beis HaMikdash? But I don't remember the other one.
Okay, so the
So-
one was, will non-Jews have clarity when Mashiach comes so that they will stop teaching transgender issues? Not only
Okay,
non-Jews, but
okay. So let's do with women in the Beis HaMikdash. Remember, I told you there were three parts: the Azara, right, the Heichal, and the Kodesh Kodshim. Only lay people were allowed in the Azara. Women and men who were lay people were allowed in the Azara. And it was even referred to as the Ezras Nashim. But only Kohanim and Leviim were allowed into the other two because they're representative of the people, and it was exclusive to them. Meaning where only a Kohen or a Levin go, a layman can't go either. So wherever men were allowed to go who were ordinary and not Kohanim and Leviim, women were also allowed to go, and that's why the Azara is often called the Ezrat Nashim. In terms of Goyim, will they get clarity? So it says in Nevi'im that we'll all serve Hashem shoulder to shoulder. Their capacities are different than ours. They'll look to us to be the conduit through which their Torah comes. It says, Ki mitzion tetei Torah, they will not have Torah, but through contact with us, they'll be able to learn how to live their lives. There was a third one. What was the third one?
Can I just ask you a question?
I
Yeah,
guess.
the question was, how do you define what's going on in Israel, the hidden agenda from Hashem?
If it's hidden, do I know Hashem's hidden agenda? Not yet. I certainly don't know, but I'll tell you something the Maharal says. He talks about the divisiveness that will be here before Mashiach comes. Among the things that he attributes it to is that the truth is so scattered. It says, Emet min haaretz titzmach, it grows from the earth. So people have access to a certain bit of truth. They don't necessarily have Torah, and they think that the truth that they found is ultimate truth. So this is where the passion of the left is coming from. Basic ideas like it's good to be tolerant are true, but they don't know Torah, they don't know anything else. So it does say what the process is. The Maharal doesn't tell us that clearly. He tells us many possible scenarios. He doesn't tell us which one it will be. I don't think he knew which one it would be. I think it has to emerge as it emerges. But the result will be that the piece of people who are the furthest, most passionate in what their tiny bit of truth tells them will be the first to do tshuva, and they'll do tshuva with the greatest passion because they were seeking truth.
okay.
Rebbetzin Gottlieb, you mentioned that it said about when Moshiach comes about Goyim wanted to do Teshuvah, right? Or Goyim will have Hashem. So doesn't the Gemara say about a sukkah or something, that when Moshiach comes, they'll ask Goyim questions, you know, and we didn't have a mitzvah, and they said you could have a mitzvah sukkah or something. So Goyim will know about Hashem, will know about mitzvahs, and if those that want to come close to Hashem could come close, i.e. like Yisrael.
So there'll be no conversion after Mashiach comes. And the reason is that conversion has to be a combination of rejection of that which was and desire for more. Or Chaim says that in order for that to be sincere, and what Or Chaim says is not necessarily the only view here, but what the Or Chaim says is that Hashem purposely put some Jewish souls in non-Jewish bodies in order to achieve two ends. One is that they'll be the moral voice of the non-Jewish world so that they don't disintegrate into becoming animals. I was just reading a book about the similarities between chimps and people. And, the DNA is very similar, almost identical, not identical. But it led some people, there was an art, I'm not even talking about a scientific journal. National Geographic had this article when they thought that the chimpanzees were going to become extinct, that we should declare them human so that they won't be extincted. Okay, so he says that the Goyim could end up becoming very animalistic, so they need a certain amount of superior souls. We Jews also need it because we need to see people who come from far move themselves to this point, and it irritates us. It acts as an irritant.
Dee, where you want to
and it's
go?
good for us.
You have to go?
Once
We have to
Mashiach comes, the gates of conversions are closed. All of the Jewish souls and non-Jewish bodies would have already found their way back. That's the view of the Or Chaim.
Amazing. And Rebbetzin, Gottlieb, I know I'm going back to my little things that I saw from Rabbi Yisrael Gellis, but what about the fruit on the tzalach? Did you hear about that? Or well, that's what you sent me. That's the one, the video clip you sent.
Yes, I sent it to you. Rambam says clearly that there are many, many scenarios of how Mashiach could come. And we'll only know which one Hashem chooses as he chooses it. And that delving into it too deeply doesn't lead you to greater love of Hashem or greater awe of Hashem. I don't want to go there.
Okay. Great. Okay. Are we done?
Okay, that's it.
We look forward to
Okay.
being in Yerushalayim with you before Shabbos.
Amen, amen, amen. Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
thank you, everybody. Thank
you.
you.